Our next speaker was born and raised in Guatemala before going to university in Durham, North Carolina, and is now a professor of computer science at Carnegie Mellon University, which sports one of the finest computer science departments in the world. In addition to some pretty serious academic credentials, he's showed off his commercial chops last year when his spin-out company ReCaptcha was bought by Google. Could we please welcome Professor Luis von Ahn?
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, good. Okay, I want to start by asking you guys a question. How many of you have had to fill out some sort of web form where you've been asked to read a distorted sequence of characters or a distorted word such as this one? Outstanding. How many of you found it really, really annoying? Good, well, I invented that. I should say I was one of the people who invented that. There are others. But that thing is called a CAPTCHA. And the reason is there is to make sure that you, the entity filling out the form, are actually a human and not some sort of computer program that was written to submit the form millions and millions of times. And the reason it works is because humans, at least non-visually impaired humans, have no trouble reading these distorted squiggly characters, whereas computer programs simply can't do it as well yet. Okay, now, CAPTCHAs are used all over the internet. And since they're used so often, a lot of times the precise sequence of random characters that are shown to the user is not so fortunate. So this is an example from the registration form at Yahoo. The random characters that happen to be shown to the user happen to be W-A-I-T, which of course spell a word. But the best is the help message that the Yahoo help desk got about 20 minutes after this was presented. Okay. They thought they had to wait. This, of course, is not as bad as this poor person who restarted their computer. Okay, so CAPTCHAs are used all over the internet, and I could spend the next hour talking about all the different applications that they have. But instead of doing that, let me just illustrate one of the applications through a little story. And it's the following. A few years ago, Slashdot, which in case if you don't know, it's a very popular website for nerds like me, put up this poll in their site asking, which is the best computer science graduate school in the United States? And if you think about it for a second, this is a really dangerous question to ask over the internet. Because as soon as the poll went up, students at Carnegie Mellon wrote a program that voted for Carnegie Mellon millions and millions of times. The next day, students at MIT wrote their own program. And a few days later, the poll had to be taken down because both CMU and MIT had more than 6 billion votes. And every other school had less than 1,000. I guess if you think about it, the poll did exactly what it was supposed to do. But in general, we simply cannot trust the results of an online poll because anybody could just write a program to vote for their favorite option. Now, this is one place where CAPTCHAs can come in. You can use a CAPTCHA to prevent this. Okay, so you can use a CAPTCHA to ensure that only humans can vote. Another application of CAPTCHA is in free email services. This is probably where most of you haven't seen them. So there's a lot of companies that offer free email services, so Yahoo, Google, Microsoft. All of them offer free email services, and up until a few years ago, they were all suffering from a very specific type of attack. And it was people who wrote programs to obtain millions and millions of email accounts for free. And the people who wrote these programs were spammers. So here's the thing. If you're a spammer, it's actually quite worthwhile to send spam from accounts at yahoo.com because nobody's going to block all of yahoo.com. Right? So it's quite worthwhile to send spam from accounts at yahoo.com. But if you're a spammer, you run into the problem that each Yahoo account only allows you to send like 100 messages a day. So if you want to send 10 trillion messages per day, you have to own millions of Yahoo accounts from which you can send like 10 messages per day. So this is what spammers were doing about 10 years ago. And the solution, and this is what we originally suggested to Yahoo, was to use a CAPTCHA to make sure that only humans can obtain free email accounts. Okay, so in general, CAPTCHAs are used to stop bad people from doing bad things on the internet. Now, of course, spammers on their side have started coming up with all kinds of dirty hacks to get around the CAPTCHAs that are being used in practice. Let me show you a couple of the things that they've started doing. Here's one of them. We call them CAPTCHA sweatshops. So spam companies have actually started hiring people to type CAPTCHAs all day long. This is usually happening. This is happening, and this is usually happening in other countries where the minimum wage is a lot lower. But it is happening. Now, there's at least two consolations. So first, it's at least costing them some. So whereas before they could get millions and millions of email accounts for free, now they have to pay a fraction of a cent per account, so they can't get that many. Second, if you think about it, CAPTCHAs are actually generating jobs in underdeveloped countries. Okay, I'm gonna run for president soon. Okay, so that's one That's one thing that spammers have started doing. Let me tell you an even dirtier hack, and I'm sure some of you have heard about this. And this is what some pornography companies have started doing to get around the CAPTCHAs that are being used in practice. Okay, so there's a lot of pornography on the web, and these pornography companies would like to send spam. And here's how they do it. So imagine there's a pornography company that would like to send spam from Yahoo accounts. So they need to obtain millions of Yahoo accounts from which they can send spam. What they do is they write a program that fills out the entire registration form at Yahoo. Now, whenever the program gets to the CAPTCHA, it can't read it. So what it does is it copies the CAPTCHA back to the porn page. Now, back at the porn page, there's a lot of people looking at pornography. And suddenly one of them gets this screen saying, hey, if you want to see the next pornographic image or pornographic video, you got to type the word that's in the box below. And you know what people do? They type it as fast as possible. And by doing so, they are effectively solving the CAPTCHA for the porn company. That is, they are effectively obtaining an email account that the porn company can later use to spam you. Okay, so pornographers, they're very smart people. I always tell that. Okay, so let me now show you some different examples of CAPTCHA. So the CAPTCHA that most everybody has seen is the squiggly characters. That's what most everybody has seen. But the idea is a lot more general. The idea is it's just a test that tries to distinguish whether you're a human or a computer. So it's just a test that supposedly all humans can do, but no computer can do. Okay, so let me show you a few of the different ones that people have started coming up with, just because they want to be different and because they're pretty entertaining. The first one is a CAPTCHA that started coming up in all kinds of... Okay, so by the way, these are supposed to be tests. When you look at them, they're supposed to be tests that everybody can do, but that computers cannot. Okay? The first one is a CAPTCHA that started coming up in all kinds of Russian sites. We're going to call this the Russian CAPTCHA. Of course, this is a pretty bad CAPTCHA because actually computers can do this. But it's funny to see that in Russia, they think anybody could just solve a limit. Okay, so it's funny to see that. So that's what happens in Russia. Let me show you a CAPTCHA that started coming up in all kinds of Indian sites. We're going to call this the Indian CAPTCHA. You have to analyze the circuit. Again, not such a good CAPTCHA because computers can just do this. But again, it's funny to see that they think in India just any human can do this. This is like the test for humanity, right? Now, just to give you a comparison, okay, so in Russia, the CAPTCHA, you got to solve a limit. In India, you got to analyze the circuit. Let me show you the CAPTCHA that has started coming up in all kinds of US-based blogs. We're going to call this the American CAPTCHA. I wish I was making this up. Again, it's a pretty bad CAPTCHA because computers can add. Okay, I could tell funny stories about CAPTCHA for hours. Let me get into what the subject of this talk actually is. It's called ReCaptcha. This is a new project. What's not so new anymore. We started about 3 years. It's like the next generation of CAPTCHAs. We couldn't come up with a better name, so we just added a re before it. So it's a ReCaptcha. But where this came from is the following. It turns out that approximately 200 million CAPTCHAs are typed every day by people around the world. Okay, I type one roughly once every 2 or 3 days, and it turns out there's a lot of people like me. So if you add it all up, it's about 200 million times a day a CAPTCHA is typed. Now, when I first heard this number, I was quite proud of myself. I thought, look at the impact that my research has had. But then I started feeling bad. See, here's the thing. Not only are they annoying, but each time you type one, essentially you waste 10 seconds of your time. It takes approximately 10 seconds of time to do one. And if you multiply 10 seconds by 200 million, you get that humanity as a whole is wasting about 500,000 hours every day typing these annoying CAPTCHAs. Okay, so then I started feeling bad. And then I started thinking, is there something that we can do about this? Well, first of all, we can't just get rid of CAPTCHAs because the security of the web sort of depends on them. But then I started thinking, is there any way in which we can use this effort, this human effort, for something that's good for humanity? The thing is, during those 10 seconds, while you're typing a CAPTCHA, your brain is doing something amazing. Your brain is doing something that computers cannot yet do. So can we get 10 seconds of useful work out of that? Another way of putting it is there's some humongous problem that we cannot yet get computers to solve, but that somehow we can split into tiny 10-second chunks such that each time somebody types a CAPTCHA, they solve a little bit of this problem. And the answer to that is yes, and this is what we're doing now. So nowadays, when you type a CAPTCHA, not only are you authenticating yourself as a human, but in addition, you're actually helping us to digitize books. Okay, so let me explain how this works. So there's a lot of projects out there trying to digitize books. So Google has one, the Internet Archive has one, Amazon with the Kindle is now trying to digitize books. Basically, the way it works is, here's how digitization works. First, you start with an old book, like a book You've seen them, right? Like it's physical things. Yeah. Okay, so you start with that, and then you scan it. Now, scanning a book is like taking a digital photograph of every page of the book. It gives you an image for every page of the book. The next step in this process is that the computer needs to be able to decipher all of the words in this image. That's done using a technology called OCR, for optical character recognition. So that this is a program that takes an image with text and tries to decipher the text in it. The problem is that OCR is not perfect, especially for older books where the ink has faded. The computer cannot recognize a lot of the words. For example, this scan, which is actually a pretty high-quality scan, when you try to get the computer to recognize all the words in there, this is what you get. In yellow are all the mistakes. So there's a lot of words that it simply cannot recognize. For things that were written more than 100 years ago, the computer cannot recognize between 30 and 40% of all the words. Okay, so what we're doing now is we're taking all of the words that the computer cannot recognize, and we're getting people to read them for us while they're typing a CAPTCHA on the internet. Okay, so the idea is the following. Here's how the system works. We start with a scan book. Then we take all of the words that the computer cannot recognize. Okay, so these are all the words the computer cannot recognize. Now, how do we know whether the word can be recognized by the computer or not? The computer actually tells us whether it can recognize it or not. It gives us a confidence score, so we can actually tell when the computer probably made a mistake or not. So we're going to take all the words that the computer cannot recognize, and we're going to use these as the basis for a CAPTCHA. Notice these are perfect for a CAPTCHA because these are, by definition, words that the computer could not recognize. Okay, so we're going to take this, we're going to distort it even more to make sure that the computer cannot recognize it, and then we're going to use this as a CAPTCHA. So, for example, whenever you're trying to get an account on Yahoo, you're going to see this. This is a word that came directly out of a book, and you're going to type it for us. Now, you might be wondering, how can we use this as a CAPTCHA if the system doesn't know the answer for it? Okay, this is a word that the system took out of a book. It didn't know what it was, and now it's going to present it to you. And it should be the case that if you type the word between, it lets you in. But if you don't type the word between, it doesn't let you in. How can it do that? The solution to this problem, here's what we do. Whenever we present a brand new word, one for which the system doesn't know the answer, what we do is we actually present it to the user along with another word, one for which the system does know the answer. Okay, so we're going to give the users one for which the system knows the answer, one for which it doesn't. We're not going to tell the users which one's which. And we're going to say, please type both. And if you type the word for which the system already knew the answer correctly, then the system assumes you're a human. And it also gets some confidence that you typed the other word correctly. And if you repeat the same process to like 10 different people, and they all type the same word, that the new word is the word between, we get with overwhelmingly high confidence that the new word really is the word between, and we get one more word digitized. Okay, so this is the process by which a single word is digitized. So what we did about 3 years ago or so is we released this web service. It's called ReCaptcha, where the idea is if you're a website, say like Facebook, that needs CAPTCHAs to protect yourself against spam. By the way, all websites pretty much need CAPTCHAs to protect themselves against spam. Then you can come talk to us, and we'll give you the CAPTCHAs for free. The only caveat is that we get to see what your users are typing whenever they are doing a CAPTCHA, so that we get to digitize books. And ever since we released this, a lot of websites have switched from the old CAPTCHA, where people wasted their time, to the new CAPTCHA, where people are helping to digitize books. So for example, Facebook switched. So every time you get a Facebook account, you help digitize a book. Ticketmaster, Craigslist, Twitter, and by now about 200,000 websites have all switched from the old CAPTCHA to the new CAPTCHA. And since so many sites are using the new CAPTCHA, the number of words that we're digitizing per day is extremely high. This, by the way, this graphic is a little old. By now, the number of words that we're digitizing per day is about 80 million. Thank you. Okay, so we're doing about 80 million words per day, which is the equivalent of about 4 million books a year, one word at a time, by just having people type CAPTCHAs on the internet. Okay, so, and since we're doing so many words per day, again, funny things can happen, and this is especially true because we are now giving people two randomly juxtaposed English words right next to each other. So funny things can happen. So for example, we presented this word, which by itself there's nothing wrong with it, it's just the word Christians. But if you put it along with another randomly chosen word, bad things could happen. So we showed this, which is somewhat bad, but it's even worse because the particular website where we showed this, there's like 200,000 websites. It happened to be that the website where we showed this particular combination of words was called the Embassy of the Kingdom of God. Oops. Here's another one. JohnEdwards.com, US politician. Oops. So we go around insulting people every day, left and right. It's unfortunate because there's nothing we can do about this because one of the words, we don't actually know what it is. So there's really not much we can do about this. So we just insult people. Okay. Now, I know some of you are thinking this. Wait a second. You started out by saying that humanity as a whole is wasting 500,000 hours every day typing these annoying CAPTCHAs. And your solution is to double that amount of time by giving people 2 words instead of 1. That's a good thought to have, but you're wrong. Here's the thing. It turns out that typing 2 English words takes equally as long as typing 6 to 8 randomly chosen characters. Okay, previous CAPTCHAs used 6 to 8 randomly chosen characters. Now we're using 2 randomly chosen English words. Because English words have patterns associated to them that we're all accustomed to, the actual amount of time that people spend typing CAPTCHAs has not increased. In fact, in some cases, it has even gone down. Okay, so we haven't increased the time. Here's another thing that I really like this number. This is the total number of people in the world, distinct people in the world, that have helped us digitize at least 1 word out of a book using ReCaptCHA. So about 10% of the world's population has helped us digitize books through ReCaptCHA. I don't know of any other project where so many people have collaborated with each other without knowing so. Okay, here's another thing that I want to talk about again. Remember I told you about CAPTCHA sweatshops? There's all these spam companies out there hiring teams of humans to type CAPTCHAs all day long. This is still happening with ReCaptCHA, but now notice the irony of it all. Okay, so spam companies are actually hiring humans to type CAPTCHAs all day long, which in turn are being used to digitize books. Okay, so we've turned spammers into good people. Because they're just bankrolling the book digitization process. And another thing that I like to say in this slide is actually a conversation that we recently had with one of these people who owns a CAPTCHA sweatshop. And it was a very interesting conversation because I've never actually talked to a real spammer in real life. So we had an email conversation with this person who owns a CAPTCHA sweatshop. Let me just show you how the conversation went. So this is what it started. This is how it started. Oh, whoops. I don't think there should be a sound, but OK. So they started by saying, would you help us find some CAPTCHA project? Now, when he said that, we didn't understand what he meant because we are a CAPTCHA project. We don't know what you mean. But in any case, when he said that, we replied saying, what kind of CAPTCHA project are you looking for? And then in his next response is when we realized that this guy was actually a guy who owns a CAPTCHA sweatshop. So he said to us, they're manually breaking a different type of CAPTCHA right now. They have the ability to type many CAPTCHAs every day. Tell us how we can help you. I don't know if you see the irony here. This is like contacting the police, saying I have a crime to commit, right? But in any case, this guy contacted, he was very confused. So he contacted us, and then when we saw that, we thought, this guy is for real, because his English is very broken, so he must be for real. So we started asking him all kinds of questions. So we said, how fast can you type? And he told us, he said he personally can type more than 60 words per minute, but he has a big team. He can give us a lot of product. Then we asked him, does he mind that he's helping spammers with this CAPTCHA sweatshop thing? And he said he didn't care about that. And then the next question that we asked him is the thing that we should have asked him from the beginning. I don't know why this didn't occur to us. Well, we asked him the following, which is this. How does he deal with IP address blocking? See, here's the thing. Okay, your IP address is your internet address. Okay, every computer, when you're connected to the internet, is supposed to have a unique IP address. Here's the thing. With ReCaptCHA, we know your IP address. So if you are a normal person, you type like 3 CAPTCHAs per day. However, if you're one of these CAPTCHA sweatshops, you're typing tens of thousands of CAPTCHAs per day. And since we know your IP address, we block you. But somehow, these people are getting around our IP address blocking. So we just asked this guy, how do you get around our IP address blocking? And then he went and told us exactly how they get around the IP address. Which was awesome, because now we could find them, and we could block them. So at first I thought, great, let's block all these guys. But then we started thinking, wait a second, why block them? We have this great resource at hand. So instead of blocking them, now whenever we think that it's a person with a CAPTCHA sweatshop, instead of blocking them, we just give them a different type of CAPTCHA. We just say, please type that whole thing. And for the first 2 weeks, it totally worked. They were typing entire books. It was awesome. Huh?
We didn't get the answer for that.
They stopped. Okay, and then this is the last thing actually. So for about a year ago, Google actually bought the company that was around this to help digitize their books. So now the books that people are helping to digitize are all coming from the Google Books project. And that's it. That is all I have. Thank you.